Today I'm going to go over how to beat the Slav, or find some very good play in the Slav with the white pieces. Now the Slav, which is d4, d5, c4, and c6, has a very safe nature to it. Black tries to just develop their pieces, get this pyramid structure, and black has generally speaking, a very safe setup. And that means that it's not too dangerous to play against the Slav, but at the same time, it's a little hard to find good play, good attacking chances with the white pieces. And so for that reason, today I want to introduce a system that maybe you haven't really seen played against the Slav that I think gives white their best chances. And it's a very powerful setup for white. So c6, here you can play the move e3, or you can play the move knight to f3. They will probably transpose. But the key is kind of to hold off on playing knight c3. Now, knight c3 is definitely a totally fine move. I think it's one of the most popular moves, if not the most popular move in this position, but it doesn't really abide by the setup that I want to show you. So this is a different setup, which, again, very popular and very good, but the setup that I want to go over is e3 and knight to f3. And the reason that we delay moving this knight will become very apparent soon. So e3, knight to f6 or e6. Again, we're practically going to transpose into this position almost always. I guess I should add, if instead they do hold off on playing e6 with the idea of maybe developing their bishop with something like bishop f5, well, here, not to let black get too much control over the light squares in the early stages of the game, I recommend bishop d3. And after takes, white has a totally pleasant game here. Something like knight to d7 and castles. White has much more center control. The bishop can develop in a number of ways, maybe to a3, but probably just fianchetto. Although at the same time, e4 and some center pawn moves are definitely on the table, and then the bishop can maybe come out this way as well. The knight can develop. White has more space, and I mean, this is just a nice, calm position to be with white. And so that's something I should mention, but typically e6 is what you're going to see. And here, I recommend the move b3. And the reason that you play b3, because I think bishop d3 is the more obvious move. But the issue with this move is after takes, you have to move the bishop again. And this isn't necessarily a great diagonal against the Slav. I mean, the f7 square and e6 square are very safe with this pawn structure, and for that reason d3 is more appealing to me, to target this h7 square and attack along this diagonal. And so for that reason, not only did you move twice, but also you're not in your best square, I believe, and that's why I hold off on developing the bishop and instead play b3 with the idea of then developing the bishop. And after takes, I can take with the pawn, the bishop stays on this nice diagonal, and I have very good center control. The b-file is also something that can open up there. So that's kind of the idea with b3. And also, not to mention, you, of course, one of the biggest benefits is dealing with this bishop, because with e3, you do try to play e4, as you'll see later in the video, but at the same time, you don't really want to hold off on developing until you play e4, because that can take a lot of time. And so bishop b2 is definitely one of your upcoming moves in this setup. And then from here, black can play really two main tries when it comes to developing their dark square bishop. Bishop b4, I quickly want to mention because it's less common, but it's still important to touch on, because if you want to maintain the style of this b3 opening, you want to play knight to d2 here, not bishop d2. And of course, the idea is to be able in your next move to play bishop b2, bishop to d3, castle, and then the middle game, it's going to be very similar to if they were to play bishop d6, which is what we're going to really explore in a second. But this is kind of the big idea. If they give you a check, block with the knight, which is where the knight wants to be anyways in this setup. But let's talk about bishop d6, where we're also going to talk about some middle game ideas. So bishop d6, you continue with bishop d3. Again, always maintaining the idea that if they take, you can take with the pawn here. So they castle, you castle, let's say. And now knight to d7, the most obvious move for black, developing their knight. And here you can also just develop your bishop, bishop to b2. And if they play the move b6 here, trying to develop their other bishop, Again, this is all just the most standard moves that black will probably play. You can develop your other knight to d2, and this is kind of the big setup. If you were to really sort of memorize this structure, that's where you want your pieces coming into the middle game. And so once you achieve here, there's really two plans for white here. Well, I guess three, depending on how you look at it. So the first plan is to push e4, and we'll look at this in a second, but pushing e4 is the biggest pawn push that you can play, and it allows you to really activate a lot of your pieces and get a very open position where you're going to have more space and a very nice position. The second idea is actually to stop black from pushing their pawn, because they want to play e5 with basically the same ideas of us playing e4. They want to get space, they want to open up the position and just develop their pieces nicely. And so to stop e5, we want to play knight to e5, and we're all going to look at this in a second, but that's your second idea, to play knight e5. The other knight can come behind, or f4 is the main idea as well. And a third and final idea, if really there's no way to play one of these two moves, which is rare but possible, then you can just play more positionally, right? Get your rooks to the center, c1 and e1, and you can always consider these pawn moves as well with your c-pawn. But okay, so knight to d2, and here let's say they play rook to e8. And this is kind of a signal to you that they want to push e5. And so in some cases you can push e4 before they get to push e5, but I would even recommend here to just play knight to e5. And this seems very anti-positional, because can't they just take here and claim in the end that our pawn structure is ruined? But here's the thing. First of all, in some cases their knight's just going to be trapped. Here they have some tactical escape with knight to c5, carving out this square for this other knight. But the end position is these pawns are actually good for us. First of all, the bishop here is super powerful and open, and we're just going to follow this up with queen to h5. You can play f4 first, but ultimately you get your queen over to the king side, make some weaknesses, and ultimately play f4 to support your center. And once you reach this position, this is just a really nice aggressive position. You have all the initiative here. A rook lift is certainly an option. The knight can come in as well. The bishop here, very powerful along this diagonal, the queen obviously. And another idea maybe is f5. If you can carve out room on f6, that will be very nice. Or you can try to open up the position with f5. So a lot of good moves in the air for white here, and this is just a very pleasant position to be at. So with that in mind, that's kind of the idea of playing knight to e5. You want to gain a lot of space, support your center, and start to attack. The other option for them is, instead of playing rook to e8, play something like bishop to b7 here, not really trying to go for pawn to e5 here. Now here, it should be noted that you can go knight to e5 anyways, with the simple idea of the same thing that we just happened, right? You don't need the rook here. You can go into this line and we get basically the same position. Your queen will get out in some cases. The rook can come in, the knight. Very pleasant. So that's one opportunity. But another thing that I want to introduce is this idea of e4, which is kind of the secondary plan that you have aside from knight to e5. Now with e4, your idea is to open up the position and get a different style of position. In the other position where we played knight to e5, we got a more closed position where we had to maneuver our pieces to attack. With e4, we're basically looking to just trade in the center and kind of get this end position where we have more space. Our bishop's very nice with the ideas maybe of d5 to open up this bishop. All of our pieces are nice here. I mean, the rooks can centralize, queens can come out to c2. You can set up something like bishop c2, queen d3. Then the rooks can come to the d file as well. You always have these pawn breaks to your advantage. And so this is just a very quiet but pleasant position to be with white. And so these are kind of the two main positions you're probably going to reach in the setup, either the closed positions with f4 or these very open positions where your two bishops really give you a very pleasant and nice position. So that's kind of the setup with b3. Main things to remember are where to develop your pieces, right? So the knight, so e3, the knight can come to f3, knight to d2, bishop to b3, only after playing the move b3 and bishop to b2 and castles, and you get this very nice structure. So this is how I would recommend tackling the Slav defense. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you next time. Peace out.